Let's get into it now with former Speaker of the House and Fox News contributor Newt Gingrich. Newt, it is always a pleasure to see you. Thank you for being here.
It's good to be with you.
Your expectations for what we'll hear today?
I don't know. I'm going to watch with great interest at 1:15. First of all, just how Biden performs. I think he's probably set up a pretty clever diversion by naming Vice President Harris as being in charge of the border. So if he wants to, he can take every single border immigration question and say, well, that's really Kamala's job, and you ought to ask her about it later on. Next question. So we'll see whether he wants to actually engage on that or whether he wants to divert it all to her. I think
that is unbelievable. You're right.
When you go, when you go 100 days without a press conference, there are so many different topics. What does he think of Putin withdrawing the Russian ambassador? What does he think of the Chinese lecturing us aggressively for 20 minutes in Anchorage? What does he think about the whole issue of the rise of violence across the whole country? Where does he stand on the violence in Portland, for example, or the areas in Minneapolis, which are now as violent as Portland? There are a whole range of these things, and then you get into the question of, given the economic news you just had, why would you pass more and more stimulus? You're in grave danger, as a number of even liberal economists have pointed out, of beginning to really have inflation next year. People are starting to see it in food prices, gasoline prices. Is he at all concerned that, in fact, by piling even more gasoline on the fire, you're going to have a pretty big economic backlash? And I think that's a very real concern. Larry Summers, who's a pretty liberal Democrat, has warned that we're on the edge of stimulating real inflation.
Well, with good reason. We've thrown $5.3 trillion at this economy in a year, and now already 3 seconds later, we're talking about another $3 trillion package, which they're calling infrastructure, but looks more like a climate change package. I mean, they're mislabeling everything. The relief package that they just wanted to jam in stuff like money to the arts and states, they call that a COVID relief package, and now they're calling the climate change package an infrastructure package. But do you think that the president is going to be able to get away with constantly blaming Donald Trump for all of his, poor performance and bad decisions? I mean, he continues to say he inherited the border crisis from President Trump, despite the fact that he came in on day one and overturned Trump's policies.
Well, look, I'm not sure what get away with means. The country increasingly believes that this is a crisis. 92% of Hispanic Americans want to see every immigrant tested for COVID. 90% of all Americans want to see every immigrant tested for COVID. This administration is presiding over not a crisis, but a disaster. And it's going to get worse because, let's be clear. Somebody gets here in the United States, they pick up a cell phone, they call back home, and they say, hey, you ought to come. It's a lot better than X, name the country. And I think that there are 40 or 50 million people, according to Gallup, who would like to come to the United States this year. So if they're not careful, Kamala Harris is going to be presiding over a total disaster, and people will know it. I mean, this is not one of those things where you hide it. There are thousands. When they're having to take over, I said yesterday, if you're not willing to build a wall, you're going to build dormitories. And the result is going to be thousands and thousands of people, particularly young teenagers, being put in these huge facilities. I think 3,000 teenagers in Dallas alone at their convention center. They're now talking about 2,000 in San Diego. They're talking about taking over federal military property. They're talking about building additional dormitories. This is going to be a rolling nightmare before very long. And the longer they let it go, the more the word's going to get out worldwide, the more people are going to show up here illegally.